Hi, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. My name is Zach Baumer. I'm the Climate Program Manager in the Office of Sustainability. And today I have with me Celine Rendon, who's our Community Engagement Specialist with us in the Office of Sustainability. Today, we're going to be giving a webinar explaining the overview of the Austin Community Climate Plan revision process and stepping through where we are in that process, where we're going. We're about 2/3 of the way through the plan development process right now. And we wanted to share our progress with all the boards and commissions and get your input and feedback early in this process. So if you have any comments or questions or ideas for us in this plan, we will be able to incorporate those now and early. And then the plan is, once we have finished finished the draft and our full document, that we will bring it back to you for revision and your support in around August of 2020. We realize with the COVID-19 situation that's going on right now that it's challenging for boards and commissions to meet. It's challenging to do a community engagement process. Everything is a challenge right now. Our world is in flux, but we know climate change is still happening. And we have really important work to do here with climate change and equity. So we're excited to tell you more about that today. So Celine, do you want to say a couple things before we get started?
So I'm Celine Rendon. I'm the Community Engagement Specialist with the Office of Sustainability. I started back in September of 2019, specifically for the Community Climate Plan. So it's been about 8 months. And yeah, like what Zach said, we'll be talking a lot about what's been going on for the past 8 months with this whole process and a lot of lessons learned already. So happy to share this with all of you.
Great. All right, I'm going to switch over to sharing my slides now. We're going to step through a slide presentation. And when you get this webinar link and you view this, you'll also have a set of these slides. So if you have comments or questions, please reach out to us. Our emails and our phone numbers are at the end. And great, we'll jump into the slide presentation. Okay, so like I said earlier, I'm with the City of Austin's Office of Sustainability, Climate Program Manager Zach Baumer. And today we're going to step through where we are with the Austin Community Climate Plan revision for 2020. Okay, so generally what we're going to go through is the goals of the revision process. The first Austin Community Climate Plan was adopted by City Council in 2015, so this is the 5-year revision. Next, we're going to go over the process overview and the schedule, kind of how this whole program and process has been working. Then next, we're going to step through an equity tool. We are bringing racial equity as a lens and a central focal point to the revision of this plan. So we're going to talk through how we're actually doing that. And then finally, we're going to go through next steps and moving forward, where we go from here to finalization of the plan. Okay, so if you haven't met me or met anyone from the Office of Sustainability before, we are part of management services in the City of Austin. Our mission statement is to protect and improve Austin's quality of life now and for future generations by leading efforts to focus on net zero community-wide greenhouse gas emissions, a healthy and just local food system, and a climate resilient and adaptive city. So those are the 3 focus areas of our office. We all know climate change is happening. It's being caused by humans burning fossil fuels and increasing greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Greenhouse gases have increased in the atmosphere to over 400 parts per million as they've been measured in the atmosphere. They continue to go up and up and up. And if we do not start reducing greenhouse gas emissions globally, bring them down, stabilize them, the Earth's climate will warm more than it's projected right now. It's already warmed 1 degree Celsius and is projected to warm at least 1.5 and potentially more than 2 degrees or 3 degrees or even more in warming if we do not reduce global greenhouse gas emissions and eventually pull greenhouse gas emissions out of the atmosphere. Greenhouse gas emissions come from, as I said, burning fossil fuels, methane, emitting those things into the atmosphere more than the Earth can reabsorb them. Scientists tell us that any warming more than 1.5 degrees is potentially dangerous is going to cause dangerous climate change. Any warming more than 2 degrees or more could be catastrophic to life as we know it on this planet. So there's a lot more complication to this issue, which we're going to get into, but that's sort of where we're starting with trying to work on reducing emissions and reducing our impact on climate change. So the next really big issue that we have is equity. So the city of Austin has a chief equity officer. We have an equity office. We as a city have made this commitment that the city is going to strive for eliminating racial equity, because racial equity is the condition where race no longer predicts a person's quality of life outcomes in our community. We recognize that race is the primary determinant of social equity. And we need to, as a city, come together, work with all residents, work on the historical and structural disparities that have been caused by our community and by our government, and try to address equity. So we don't mean equality, we mean equity. And this commitment is strong at the city, and we realize that all planning processes, all programs that the city now works on and goes through, we need to be thinking about equity when we do that work. So, racial equity, climate change, are those things related? We think that they are intricately related. With climate change, the goal is to eliminate the use of fossil fuels for energy and transportation. And with racial equity, the goal is to eliminate disparities that can be predicted by race. And when you start connecting those two problems, connecting those two issues, and what are the causes, what are the issues that are created by them, we come to these 7 sort of central themes here. And you're going to see these themes again as we have gone through the process of working on this climate plan revision. And we started out with just this concept of we need to infuse racial equity and climate change and work on those two topics together. And as we've done that, we've gone through workshops and trainings and a lot of collective learning from hundreds of community members along with city staff. And we've really zeroed in on these 7 themes as being the things that we want to see in our community. And if we can increase health for all members of our community, if we can increase affordability, if we can make everything accessible, if we can focus on a just transition as we address climate change, if we can preserve culture in our city, build community capacity, and provide accountability to government, if we can focus on those things, that is how addressing climate change and racial equity will actually manifest itself in the world around us. So we think that solving these 2 issues is it's essential that we do both, and it's kind of impossible to pull them apart, because solving climate change in a city that still has dramatic racial inequities is just not acceptable. Why equity and climate? It's really become a local necessity to do work in our community in Austin, and we think that's really powerful. All of the policies and programs and all the activities that we're going to talk about that are going to come out of this climate plan, they all require people and policies and government to implement and act. There's no escaping that there's a racial equity angle to all of these things. We've really realized that engaging with communities of color brings wisdom and lived experience, much beyond just the scientific experts that have focused on solving the scientific part of climate change. I've really come to understand that this is a systematic problem in the United States, and the same systems that exploit the environment are the same systems that exploit people, exploit animals, and we really have to change the systems if we're going to actually try to address these massive problems. By including this in our planning process, we really think that if we create solutions for those who need it most and can benefit the most from these changes, it's going to work for everyone. And really, I think this is a lesson learned from the first plan that we created. If we don't include everyone in these solutions, we're never going to reach the scale to solve this problem. We're talking about full-scale energy and transportation, like changeovers in our city, in our state, in our country. And you can't do that by only including part of the population, or only people with money, or only white people. That's not going to get us to solve this problem. And then finally, really the bottom line here is that if we are not proactively addressing racial equity in our work, we are perpetuating injustice. If we just ignore that this problem has a racial equity angle to it, we are just going to perpetuate the same problems and issues that have gotten to this point. So we need to proactively address this if we're going to make progress. So now to the plan. We're focusing on trying to solve climate change. We're focusing on including equity. How we got to this point, the first resolutions by City Council were focused on climate change, were adopted back in 2007. That was the first target established, the goal that municipal operations should be carbon neutral. Then in 2014 and 15 really kicked off our first community-focused efforts on climate change. City Council adopted the goal of community-wide net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. And that envisions that all of the fossil fuels in our entire community, that we would get to zero emissions by 2050. This is not just the city, this is everyone in the entire community. So our office, me and my team, went to work in 2014 and 15. We worked with about 60 community members back in 2015, had working groups, and we created the first Austin Community Climate Plan. That was adopted by City Council in 2015. We've been working on implementing that program and the different programs and policies in that plan. And now we're at the 5-year mark. So in that plan, it said that after 5 years, we should revise the plan. So starting in fall of 2019, we jumped into this revision. If you've ever heard of the Austin Community Climate Plan before, if you've seen the cover, this is what it is. It's about, it's a pretty long document. It's got over 130 some actions in it. It has these 4 focus areas, so electricity and natural gas, transportation and land use, materials and waste management, and industrial process. So it is pretty high level. It has lots and lots of actions that there is sort of, we've done annual reporting on this plan in terms of progress of implementation, and there's been varying degrees of success. Emissions have been reduced since 2015, primarily due to Austin Energy activities with renewable energy and energy efficiency. But there is still a ton more work to do. And so we are, this plan is still out there, it's still valid, and we are just going to be working on, in our plan revision, is improving on this work and learning from what we did before and trying to make it better this time around. Fast forward to 2019, this year we were selected, you may have seen it in the news earlier this year, we were selected to participate in this Bloomberg American Cities Climate Challenge. And then there have been 3 resolutions in 2019 that really have been pushing our climate work forward. So one that focused on support of the Green New Deal tenets, a next one that focused on what should be included in looking at the electrification of our transportation system. And then the third one, which established a climate emergency and asked for more reporting back to the City Council. So these directives have been helpful to us at the Office of Sustainability to drive the work forward in 2019 and really focus on the right things in this plan. When we first created this plan back in 2015, really the focus was community-wide net zero emissions by 2050. It was very broad, it was very long-term. We thought about actions, out 20, 30, 40 years into the future. We're doing a lot of aligning with other plans because at the time there were many other plans that were in play, and we wanted to make sure this new plan fit within those plans. And like I said earlier, we had about 20 staff from city departments work on this, and about 50, 60 community members that volunteered their time. So it was a good effort, but racial equity wasn't a focus, and we didn't do a huge amount of community or outreach and community engagement on this process. This time in the plan revision, a lot has changed in these last 5 years. So as I've said, we're focusing on equity. We're trying to focus on a smaller number of high impact actions. First time around, we kind of got mired in trying to put everything in the plan. So we're really trying to refine and focus on what's most important. We're adding 2 new sections this time. So a focus on consumption-based emissions, which is the upstream emissions associated with all the food and goods and the things that we buy around us in the world. We're going to be focusing on natural systems and how carbon is pulled down from the atmosphere into trees and land and soil and water and all that. And the last thing, we're really trying to expand the responsibility beyond just city-controlled activities. In the first plan, there was a lot of focus on what exactly is the city going to do. And this time, we're really trying to broaden that to what do businesses do? What do individuals do? How do we really all participate in this so we can achieve the benefits and reap the rewards of a plan like this? As similar to last time, climate change is a complicated issue that touches many different activities in our community. So this plan really fits within, we're not overarching and trying to overstep these other issues. Austin Resource Recovery is going through a process to revise their zero waste master plan. Austin Energy just got their new resource plan adopted by City Council. Our land use code has been in flux for many years. Strategic mobility plan that focuses on transportation, that was just adopted by City Council last year. Cat Metro is right in the middle of trying to put forth a proposal for Project Connect to expand public transit. And Austin Water got their water board a plan adopted last year. So all of these other plans do address emissions and are addressing climate change. So when we revised the climate plan this time, we want to figure out how do we fit ourselves within these other plans and not overstep into their boundaries and make sure that we leave no gaps. So this time around, we're going to include the goals of all these other plans in our plan, but we're specifically developing new goals and strategies and focus on these 5 areas. So sustainable buildings, electrifying the transportation system, transportation and land use, so figuring out how are all the ways we can have people not use cars in our city, and then natural systems and consumption of goods and services. That's kind of the scope of what's included this time around. This is the overall structure for the revision of this plan. We have over 100 and we're going to see in a minute, 120, 30, 40 plus participants in this planning process. There is a steering committee, which is made up of about 25 community members that have been meeting every other week since November to drive the overall direction of this process. So this group works with me and my team to direct where we go. And then on these 5 topics that we're including in the plan, we have what you see AG. AG means advisory group. So we have advisory groups for each of these topics, which are made up of around 20, 25 community members and then around 5 city staff members. So those groups are researching, studying, looking at other cities, looking at best practices, looking at scientific research, talking to individuals in the community about what this means in their lives, and they're going to be crafting the goals and strategies in these specific topic areas. There's also a large institution working group where we're going to be engaging with some large businesses on commitments that they can potentially make to support the climate plan. And then at the bottom, you see here community climate ambassadors. I'm going to let Celine explain that program in a minute, but it is kind of a fundamental program that is influencing all of the parts of this plan. This time around, as I kind of said earlier, each one of these advisory groups is going to recommend 2 to 3 high-level goals that we are set to try to reach by 2030, and then identify 5 to 10 actions in each one of these focus areas to make progress between now and 2025. So this time we're really trying to zero in on what are the immediate activities we implement in the next 5 years, and then what do we really want to achieve by 2030. So really trying to focus in here. And then we're going to focus on distributing the action amongst other actors, not just the city. And then, the real hope with involving this many people from the community in a planning process is that we can elevate the knowledge in the community, the commitments, and, the 100 plus participants that we have in this plan are an amazing group of people that have so much knowledge and so many connections in the community, are bringing so much, just to life in Austin. So the more that we can build that community of participants and build out those spheres of influence to take more and more change in action, the better. Lots going on here. This is the overall project schedule. We started this work back in August, September 2019. We have done a series of equity workshops, kickoff meetings, lots of knowledge building. We did community-focused workshops where we had 50 plus attendees from the community come in to give us input in each one of our advisory group areas. Community climate ambassadors have been doing work. We have a Speak Up Austin page. Now we're to the point of identifying the actual goals and strategies and drafting the actual plan in the June-July timeframe. So we are now fully into what is going to actually be proposed in this plan, and are aiming to have the final plan done by the end of September and up for City Council adoption by October 1st. So I'm going to hand it over to Celine, and Celine is going to talk a little bit about the Climate Ambassador Program and the equity tool that we are implementing as part of this planning process.
Thank you, Zach. So yes, our Community Climate Ambassador Program is an idea that came from the Joint Sustainability Committee, I believe earlier in the process before our initial engagement phase. But it was with the intent to pay individuals to facilitate their own conversations within their communities around climate-related issues. As you saw, what we saw with our initial engagement in trying to recruit participants on the steering committee and within the advisory groups, understanding that not everyone obviously can participate for 2 hours twice a month in these meetings. And a lot of people, are already doing work on the ground, whether it's in their organizing world or whether that's just how they're working with their community on a day-to-day basis. So this was something to kind of address that barrier and missing component. We put out the application. We were focusing on racial equity, wanting to hear from historically underrepresented groups. So the requirements include participating, in our initial workshops. They are also required to attend a minimum of 2 meetings throughout the community climate plan to provide their lived experience or providing their input based on the topic discussions that we just mentioned. And to work with us, this really is seen as a pilot program. And so we kind of want to co-create this program with them to provide their lessons learned, what methods of engagement or facilitation would work best. There's so many different communities across Austin. You really have to provide culturally relevant lens to a lot of these discussions around climate change. So we're definitely learning a lot from them. As part of the requirements, they were initially supposed to host a minimum of 3 gatherings, conducting a minimum of 5 interview reports, and that could be house meetings, that could have been one-on-one interviews, that could have been group discussions. It was really up to their input of how they wanted to design that. But because of COVID-19, we've had to totally shift to a virtual mode. And we had initial discussions with them right when the stay-at-home order was in place, if they are concerned about further participating or if they still wanted to further participate. And all of them have committed to completing their tasks and requirements because they believe that they can carry out this work, whether that's doing phone calls, whether that's just doing one-on-one interviews through whatever method that they prefer, or doing hosting online meetings. So been working with them to provide resources to do so. But also just saying for this program that we really wanted this to kind of be hopefully a replicable model that could be used in other city planning processes. A lot of other offices have expressed interest hearing about the lessons learned from this program. And I think with the ambassadors that we have, we're going to be learning a lot. So the ambassadors are being compensated $1,500 for individuals and $3,000 for organizations that have applied. And so we have a total of 10 individuals and 2 organizations that were selected. I can provide further information about that process in the description of this slide. And if you have any further questions, I can answer that as well. I also included a link to learn more about the program and the application process as well with that link. So our equity focused engagement, we did a lot of initial coordination with the equity office in terms of developing contact lists. I have been developing a whole community-wide contact list as well, trying to tap into neighborhood associations, reaching out for this plan, whether it was for our workshops, engagement for participation. So we had the intent for purposeful inclusion within our steering committee and advisory groups. We had a equity and climate workshop that was required for all participants back in December. That was facilitated by Dr. Tane Ward. He's an organizer here in Austin. He worked formally with the Sierra Club and did a lot of work in facilitating environmental justice discussions within different sustainability spaces. So that was really great. I provided a link to that as well if you'd like to read more. And like Zach mentioned, we do have an equity screening tool, which is going to be used for evaluating all the actions and impacts that are developed from the goals and strategies from our steering committee and advisory groups. We also offered $500 for compensation for folks that are participating on our steering committee advisory groups. That has been helpful for folks to be able to attend the meetings because it is a lot asking people to attend 2-hour meetings twice a month. Also learning, providing childcare and meal availability for our meetings. And like I said, learning a lot from our climate ambassadors. And so here's the demographics collected for our participants. We really did want to focus our engagement on people of color to participate. And I think, with the people that we have collaborating with us, addressing these gaps, understanding the inequities for participation within these groups. But I'm glad to know that we are collecting data on who's participating, trying to collect data as well for our community workshops that Zach mentioned earlier. So this is available, and I can answer any other further questions you have. And there's the next slide. And I believe we have also district included as well. And I'll add that to the slides after this. Yeah, here's our equity tool. You can go to the next slide. This statement here was co-created with our steering committee, understanding that low-income communities and communities of color are the most impacted by extreme weather and events, and climate change will worsen those existing harms and challenges. Realization that and acknowledgement that low-income communities and communities of color have to be prioritized to receive the disproportionate benefits of the transition to a pollution-free society. And understanding if we design and implement these programs to serve low-income communities and communities of color, we're going to positively impact all residents in the Austin area. So this statement and the equity tool was co-created with members from our steering committee, and they helped develop the themes of health, affordability, accessibility, just transition, community capacity, and cultural preservation and accountability. And these themes are helping kind of guide our advisory groups and how they're developing their goals and strategies, and ensuring that we're sharing similar values and developing those. So I provided a link to the Plan-Wide Equity Tool webinar that we had available for the steering committee and advisory groups as well. So you'll have the opportunity to dig deeper if you're interested. So these are the different themes that we have presented. And as you can see, hoping that with the statements following the themes, we're hoping that the strategy improve. For example, strategy helps improve physical and mental outcomes for low-income communities and communities of color. Ensuring that a strategy upholds the fundamental human right to clean, healthy, and adequate air, water, land, food, education, transportation, safety, and housing. So you could read through each theme, and following each theme, there's a set of questions, and each advisory group has different breakout groups, which you'll learn more about in this moment. And as they're developing these strategies, they're going to be screening through each theme with the following questions. And so I think this has been really helpful for participants to understand what the impact is with the strategy that they're proposing, and also how to just make it better. How can it benefit low-income communities and communities of color? So it is a definitely reiterative process, and helping folks have these conversations, have these talking points with their group, and to learn more from each other and how to bring these themes into center in their goals and values and strategies throughout the community climate plan. Here we have the recommended process for the advisory groups as they're developing the goals and strategies. This is adopted from the Government Alliance on Race and Equity. So we're asking them, to understand what the history is, what does the data tell us, looking at the proposed goal and strategies. They are, as you see in step 5, they're applying the equity tool to understand, does it meet our values, answering the questions and analyze the results, and to review and revise as necessary. So there's a lot of work going on with the different advisory groups. And I think too, with our equity tool and this recommended process, we are learning a lot and how it's helping them create these goals and strategies, and also more lessons learned on how to improve it and make it better. And so, like Zach said, we do have city staff participating in the different advisory groups. So it's pretty exciting to hear how this could be replicated or used as a model for further planning processes across the city of Austin.
So going forward, so now you've heard a lot about what we've been doing, what we're focusing on in this planning process. Let's talk about what's next. So as I said before, we have these 5 focus areas of the plan, and this is a little bit more of the next layer down in terms of the actual things and areas within each one of those focus areas that we're going to be developing goals and strategies for. You can see the next level of detail here when we say sustainable buildings, thinking about building materials, energy, water, and refrigerants. And when we say natural systems, diving into breaking it down into natural lands, private property, working lands, public urban landscapes. So these are still in draft, but for each one of these topics, generally, we're going to have a quantitative goal that we want to achieve by 2030. So this time around, the plan is going to have, this much more concise number of goals and strategies. But this is the direction of where we're going. A really important part of this is trying to understand how are we potentially going to reach these future targets. Setting goals is easy. Coming up with actions that we want to occur, that's easy. But understanding when you implement a program, how many emissions does it actually reduce is essential for us to try to understand, are we going to reach these long-term targets? Because we not only want a plan that is, aspirational and is realistic, but we want to make sure that when we implement the plan, that we're going to actually achieve these emission reductions in the long term. So we have created this tab. This is just a snapshot, this Tableau dashboard that has all of these different interactive, movable sliders with changing different inputs on how many people are commuting, which ways, how much emissions are we reducing in different areas, and then you can see what effect they would have on the community-wide emissions. Our community-wide emissions are still currently, as of 2019, are around 13 million metric tons per year as a whole community, and we're trying to bring those emissions down to zero. So it's really important to understand how transportation activities, energy activities, and the like, how these all fit together to actually get us to the target. So going forward, we're crafting these goals and strategies. We're making sure that all the actions in the plan go through the equity tool. We're doing calculations to understand how do they all fit together to reduce emissions towards the future. And that work is fully in process right now. So over the next 5 months, we are aiming to wrap this program up. So like I said, we're aiming for council adoption in early October. The first full draft of the plan is going to be created in June. In July, we're going to be doing all of our reviews. There's going to be multiple drafts of this plan that are reviewed back and forth by our advisory groups, by our steering committee, by departments. And then we will be coming back to boards and commissions in August, as well as releasing the document for public comment. So that will really be the time to for us to give the full draft of everything to all of you, and for you to hopefully be able to support it and support these actions going forward. So the idea of this webinar was for you all to, if you have thoughts or comments or ideas right now, get them to us so we can include them in this process before we really fully bake it. And then we'll be back in August. If you think we're on the right track, we'll be back in August with a final plan, draft final plan for you to review and hopefully support us going forward. And then hopefully by October, we have this whole final effort wrapped up. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for listening to this webinar today. We know this time is very, very challenging for all of us with COVID-19. The societal inequities that are all around us are really being revealed right now. And we know a lot of people have lost their jobs. A lot of people are hurting. A lot of people are trying to struggling to get food and make ends meet. And we think that by addressing these fundamental systematic issues in our community, that hopefully we can come out the other end of this sort of challenging time in our world and come out with a better world, about a world with less inequities, a world with less climate change, a world with more health for all of us. If you have any comments or questions, here are our email addresses. You can go to the Speak Up Austin page. Everything's saved there. All of the documents, the public meeting schedule, everything, all this material is open and transparent for viewing. So if you're interested, it's all there. There are the links. And I think that's it. Thank you so much for your time. And we will hopefully see you in person in August. If we don't see you in person, we will see you on a webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you.